Well, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 5 of the Apothecary Diaries season 2. I believe so. I keep saying like we have the episodes and they're labeled like episode 29, which is what this one is, and I was like, okay, 29 is season 2, episode 5. But man, last episode was great. Last episode was a lot of good Sherlockian fun and setup. We got the whole thing with the mirrors that were introduced. We have the idea that there's these cousins and we're not exactly sure what they want to, what their entire goal is, but they want this moon fairy to appear and they want this recreation of a ceremony their grandfather witnessed. And the only person we can find that's got the bone structure and the height is Jinshi. And I believe that MaoMao's gonna have a lot of fun getting Jinshi in drag and ready to go for this, which I'm excited. Jinshi, do it. So I do have a couple comments I want to talk about in relations to episode 3 and episode 4, which I'm super excited about. So I want to dive right into those. With episode 3, AshyRoy9454 says that there was a misunderstanding where Tao wasn't a concubine but was a court lady, so she was one of the servants. I definitely agree that I, in my head, was thinking court lady equaled low-level concubine, and that is not the case. It's more like court lady is kind of what Jinshi wanted MaoMao to be a step above a servant, but she's the apothecary, so she can't be a court lady. But she wasn't missing for a year. Our quack doctor says that she went missing recently. So she wasn't pretending to be Jin all the time. She just went there when Jinshi visited once a month. So the fact of the matter is that Jin was gone for a year, but everybody just kind of like pretended she wasn't there except when Jinshi came around, and then Tao, you know, pretended to be her. So that makes more sense. So thank you, Ashy Roy, for explaining that. Algumalgum says, I had an unusual moment of something in another show relating to the anime this week. One plot involved one of the main characters having to adopt his maternal half-brother. There's a 20-year or so age gap between them. Was this an old man yaoi? I'm joking. But anyway, and the little brother is a child. Never mind. So, who has taken to calling the older brother Papa Bro after the adoption. The old brother tells his husband he needs a better nickname. This has seared the idea of Jinshi calling the emperor Papa Bro in a chibi segment into my brain. Yeah, so I'm not watching the chibi segments until the end of the season, so it would be cute to see if that ends up happening, but I definitely think I am going to adopt Algumalgum. I'm going to adopt your labeling of Papa Bro. We're just going to call the Emperor Papa Bro whenever it relates to Jinshi, because that's literally what it is. Literally, as much as I want to keep saying father, brother, or vice versa the whole time, Papa Bro is seared into my brain now as well. So we're officially going to call him Papa Bro. So thank you for that. Icy and Pineapple 541 both talked about the mirrors in episode 4 in their comments. Icy saying, I believe that they should have bronze mirrors in ancient China and glass ones would be imported. Thank you. It was driving me crazy, and I didn't want to look it up because I didn't want spoilers. It was driving me crazy to be like, well, haven't they had mirrors this entire time? Have I even missed something? But they're bronze mirrors. They're not made out of glass. So that explains a lot. And then Pineapple's comment takes it a step further, saying it's not that the mirrors were hard to come by for the region, but mirrors specifically made of glass. Mirrors made of bronze have been created in China since the aptly named Bronze Age, around 33 to 1200 BC. And these would be mirrors primarily used in the rear palace, which is where that's coming from. Mirrors made of glass were created in the European region, and it was only through trade with them that glass mirrors came to China. For a gift from foreign envoys, such large glass mirrors held a lot more value back then compared to today. Yeah, and then we had the old desert thing, and H Banana 7 talked about the mirrors being made of glass, which is made from sand, so it ties to the culture, so it all adds up. But I do love the idea. Plus, if you think about it, the bronze mirrors would not have worked for the scenario that Gao Shun presented to MaoMao, so But yeah, but I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for these comments. I'm super excited today. It's been a full day. I had a day off work, so I've been cooking for a Dungeon Meshi episode. I've been watching Word of Honor, which is amazing, and I was like, you know what? Let's just keep the day going. Let's just keep the day on a great note, and let's watch this week's Apothecary Diary. And I was like, so that's where I'm at. But I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. We're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into the Apothecary Diaries, Season 2, Episode 5, or Episode 29. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. Well, that episode was not what I expected. I'm very curious. I'm very curious for... Obviously, I'm not going to be reading the light novels. I like watching the anime for this series, and I don't plan on reading the manga. But I do like watching it as an anime-only person and talking about it. And I'm sure that there are going to be... I know there are a lot of light novels. I know there's a lot of Apothecary Diaries material that can be covered and animated, which is super exciting. I'm very curious because this episode... it felt kind of rushed for me a little bit. And so I don't know if they tried to if they cut stuff out of the novel and ran through it, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't, and it wasn't going to be as elaborate as I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to spend a lot more time on the Moon Fairy than we ended up spending, which was very curious. So we'll talk about it as we go through. But as far as the OP and what we get this week, it definitely feels like the moth was this week. At the bottom, the moth was. Although they did talk about, they did have the little, up there in the corner, it looks like a little piece of paper that's folded up. It looks like the medicine pouch that was given to Island before she went to the clinic. So I'm like, I guess I'm really surprised that nobody's called out MaoMao before. Now they're just now calling her out, and Jinshi is just now telling her to not make medicine. I'm very curious about that because I'm like, why didn't he say so before? Why didn't he tell her before? Like, hey, because she's been around the quack doctor making medicine and he hasn't said anything. And she's clearly been delivering medicine and been around with Suirei. And Suirei wasn't making the medicine. She was just picking it up. So maybe that's how Jinshi got around having to tell her, because it just looks like she's been carrying the medicine. We'll talk about that when we get to it. I was very thrown off by the fact that we're at episode 29 and just now he's like, oh, by the way, don't let them catch you making medicine, even though you've been doing it the last year or so. I'm like, wait, why are we just now telling her this? So it seems like a weird writing choice, but we'll see as we go. So yeah, so the idea about rumors tend to take on a life of their own. This whole opening conversation, there's a lot of things you can apply to this. Rumors taking on a life of their own. I mean, you can look at Locken and Fengmian to see, like, you know, how rumors surrounding like his absence and around her death and all of that kind of, you know, died down necessarily. But then you also have the idea about Jinshi being, you know, Papa Bro. There's that whole thing about Jinshi being the child of Aduo and that being a rumor, and they can take on a life of their own. And now that kind of bookends with this episode in that you don't want people to think that you're making medicine, because that could create a rumor and then it could take on a life of its own, and you could end up... I get where Jinshi doesn't want her to suffer like her father has with the rumors around him and all of that. But in the same vein, I kind of would have told her that a little bit sooner than just now, that she shouldn't be making medicine. I'm like, but maybe he didn't feel comfortable or feel like she would listen to him or trust him as much. So the farther and wider they spread, the more distant they get from the truth. Yeah, which does beg the question, again, to know... we can't judge a book by its cover. And I have all these theories about Suirei and all of this. But in the same vein, I feel as if I have to theorize. Otherwise, I'll have this all stuck in my head and you'll be like, why didn't you say something sooner? And I'm a content creator and a reactor, so I need to say my theories. But I am saying them with the open mind of, we can't just rely on conjecture. We don't have any concrete evidence yet. So it is what it is. Maybe fables and mythology are the same. Maybe they're based on reality, or maybe they're based on rumors. Who knows? So I really like that. Also, I love the tie-in with the peach orchard and the OP. And the OP, we have the peach trees, we have the madam, we have the painting, that whole little scene, and then it getting expanded upon in last episode and this episode was really, really clever. And I really like that. I like those kind of spoilers and OPs, the stuff you don't get until after the fact. I love that. Like, that adds a whole new context to it. So also, for a ruined peach orchard on the north side of the palace, it's not that bad. I'm very curious. There's so much on the north side. There's the clinic. There is the pond where the stage is. There's the peach orchard. It almost feels like there is a dark history surrounding by the north side, and they just kind of abandon it. Like, we're not going to talk about it. But I find that interesting in itself, because then you have the clinic where the older women work. So it's like women that couldn't find a job, I guess, outside the rear palace, or they were, making a decent wage, so they decided to stay there. I think that that's fascinating that you have these older. It also is kind of sad, because it kind of is, there's a sense of it, like, you could view it two ways. You could view it as them shoving their older residents off to the side, being like, well, you can go to this clinic, and we, out of sight, out of mind, because only the staff, only the women in the rear palace go there, so nobody else really knows it exists. So if you view it in a negative context, it's like we're just shoving off our older people here and getting them out of sight, out of mind. But you can also view it from a positive context, in that they are essentially taking the women that have the most experience and knowledge from working in the rear palace and giving them a place where they can function, since, the patriarchy doesn't think ladies can be doctors. So, like you do. So Meredith Grey would have a word to say to you. But I find that to be like, you could view it as a positive or a negative. Like, on the positive, they found a place for these women to go and use their expertise where they would be recognized and be of use. You could also view it as them shoving off their old people into a corner of an abandoned section of the rear palace. You can view it from multiple ways, and that's totally fine. But I think that's interesting. Also, are those trees obscuring the clinic? Is that what that is off to the side, and MaoMao just didn't know? And there was the waterway? Okay, so a couple things. Shisui, huh? Shisui, whose dad is Shisho? I'm sorry, Shisho is the father of Lolan. Shisho, just happens to be Shisho. Father of Lolan. Shisho, Shisui, sounding similar. Just fine. That's all conjecture. Whatever. I can't say anything, because there's Sui Ray and Sui Rin, and they're not related to our knowledge. So, again, conjecture, could not be related. But I also wondered, because she's like, did my voice give it away that it was me? I'm sure someone could argue saying that we have seen Lolan's voice actor, and is that voice actress the same as Shisui's? You could say that, but I wouldn't put past an anime team to have them be voiced by two different people to throw you off. I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't. And I don't want to look it up, because I don't want that to be a confirming detail, right? I don't want to do that. So we'll just say, who knows? But what gave it away? She's so friendly. Of course. No wonder she's chatty buddies. My thing is, I find her interesting, because I'm like, why was she investigating the insects? It seems like she was doing the exact same thing that was done for the Moon Fairy and was getting a head start on it, right? Which kind of puts her in like a lock-in sort of situation, where she's planning ahead and then getting MaoMao involved, and MaoMao is the one that does like the brunt of the work, or is the connecting force, right? Because Lock-in kind of had that happen with her back in season 1, right? He set everything up for her to find out about the brothers and the medal and to piece things together, and then she took action to get recognized for it. And here you have, Shisui setting up for the Moon Fairy incident, and MaoMao kind of takes the lead, which honestly, I feel like the Emperor would be okay with MaoMao, because she's been shown to be resourceful, which is why it was kind of interesting, because it's like, he's the Emperor, so if MaoMao gets caught making the medicine or whatever, then surely the Emperor, surely Papa Bro can come up with some kind of excuse, like MaoMao's working for Jinshi. But then we're going to talk about that with the whole eunuch thing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get back to that. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Shisui is collecting these insects, and they found, they're like, there's so many insects here that I've only ever seen in books. I'm sorry, but that's increasing my theory, because when did you see books? Lowly servant girl who's been doing the laundry. When were you allowed to read books? When were you allowed to see them? I thought y'all were illiterate. Oh, no? Okay. Gee, I bet she could see a lot of books with bugs in it in the palace where she lives in as Lowland. Just humor me. I was like, oh, okay. Which we'll talk about later. But I think it's interesting that she's like, the first time I saw these guys was here too. I mean, I love the idea that Shisui is like a nerd, like a nerd, just like MaoMao. But I love the idea that if she turns out to not be Lowland, I won't be surprised. But I kind of just like the idea of Lowland hating being a concubine and just wanting to be a nerdy girl to go do things she wants to do, and this is her chance to do that. There's a part of me that really wants that for her, because otherwise Lowland is kind of boring. Lowland is the most boring concubine. She has all the fashion things, everything, but we know the least about her. She's the most uninteresting of the concubines if you take out the idea that she could be Shisui, who's posing as a servant girl. Then it adds a whole nother layer of her character that otherwise she doesn't have. And it's like, okay, well, what's, you have lots of servants and you like to dress up. What else you got, girl? And this gives her like another dimension, right? But who knows? She's like, they're nocturnal and you won't see any flying now, but they're really pretty. And that's when they come to terms with the idea that the lunar moths are what danced around the old woman during that. They flit around and sparkle in the moonlight. And that's when MaoMao's like, oh. And so I love the idea that you have from season 1, we have Locken, who's kind of like our Mycroft character. And then you have Suirei, who seemed very Moriarty, right? And then you have Shisui. Is Shisui going to be a, Milverton? I don't know. Is she pulling this double life? It's just very interesting to me that you had Suirei, who was kind of posing as somebody that she wasn't and was kind of working behind the scenes. And she kind of is very cold and distant with MaoMao, but they kind of became rivals. And here you have Shisui, who is the opposite and is very bubbly and friendly and is like, oh, MaoMao, let's be besties. And MaoMao's like, okay, I can trust you. What is going to happen with that? I don't know. Where are we going with Shisui's character and her being that way with MaoMao? I don't know. Also, when she said that the moths die right after maturing because they can't eat, that's really sad. I think I remember reading that in grade school about butterflies, and that's why they die so fast. And I was like, well, that sucks. You get to be this beautiful creature, and then you can't eat, and you die. That's not a way to go. Oh, no. So, anyway, she's like, can you tell which of these moths are male and female? And I'm like, how did Shisui know how to sex them? How? Unless she read that book, right? What is very fascinating about this moment is that MaoMao asks for help. MaoMao asks Shisui for help. And to me, comparing that to season 1, that is a huge step forward for her character. Her character in season 1 would not have wanted to get anyone involved. She would have tried to do everything by herself and would have tried to take all the blame. And here, she knows that it's a very low stakes thing for Shisui to gather up moths and caterpillars. But for her to openly ask her for help is a very big sign of trust and a very big sign of character growth for MaoMao. And I thought that was really cool. And she's like, this might actually work. And I think that Shisui's like, My question is, what was Shisui gathering up all of the bugs for if she wasn't trying to inadvertently help MaoMao? It seems awfully coincidental that she was just gathering up the bugs randomly for no reason in the same fashion. I mean, maybe she was. Maybe she was, and she's just a bug nerd. Maybe she's just a bug gym leader, Pokemon style. But it would seem to me that her dad, who grew up around the Jinshi's grandpa, would have known the story of the lunar moths prior, possibly being told by the emperor, the former emperor, or the emperor's wife. Who knows? But anyway, so MaoMao tells the plan, that she's got a plan going. Jinshi and them, these eunuchs, they're like, first we build a sauna, then we build a greenhouse, now we're building a moth sanctuary preservation. I love it. and they're collecting all the moths and putting them all into the boxes. My favorite part of this is the fact that Jinshi went to his papa bro and was like, hey, here's what, let's do this. And but here's the thing. I'm curious because Jinshi is talking with his papa bro. Is he talking to him about the moon fairy thing? Because they seem to do that all in secret, right? They seem to do that all in secret. And this seems like it's something separate. Because the moon fairy thing, I thought was going to be I thought the moon fairy incident was going to be performed in front of everybody. Now, obviously, I get now why we couldn't do that, because Gyokyo would have recognized Jinshi instantly. She would have been like, oh, what are you dressing in drag for? She would have known instantly. Lihua and Li Shu probably would have realized it was him as well. And Lolin would have been like, and would have not known what to do with that, but could have recognized him as well. And plus, you don't want all of them freaking out around Jinshi when he doesn't want to draw any more attention to himself. So it makes sense why they did the moon fairy as like an after event. But I don't know in this scene here if one of four things. If Jinshi is talking to the emperor, to Papa Bro, about collecting the moths and saying, hey, we've got a reason for doing this. Trust me, it's fine. If he's doing that, or if he was letting the emperor in on what their plan was and just said, hey, after they leave, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to affect the envoy. And he was like stroking his goatee going, okay, sure. We don't know that for sure, but that's one possibility. Two is Jinshi confronting the emperor about the school, about the literacy school, and doing the finalizations on that, because that starts up this week in this episode. So maybe it was that. Three, is he trying to convince the emperor about the letting eunuchs practice medicine, which we'll talk about. So we don't know what Jinshi is talking about with Papa Bro here, but I originally in the episode thought it was about the moon fairy deal, but it might not have been. It could have been about something else, and we just don't know. So yeah, we have the pavilion and everything, and then MaoMao's like, you guys work really fast. So there's that. A few days later, they held the envoy. It took place in the Northern Garden where the moon fairy appeared 50 years ago. And I was sure it was going to be a big performance, but it was not. It was in mystery. So they talk about how the rear palace is usually off limits to men, but they made a special exception to allow the officials to come. So we see Lihua's carriage. We see Lolin's, which you can't see Lolin in. We see Eileen and Isla. Talk about them. And then the other concubines, we see the emperor beside them. Then we see Gyokyo, and then Li Shu is at the very, very end. So yeah, done out of concern for the envoys. Now, the one, she is super brash, super bold, and she is single and ready to mingle. The other cousin does not seem as open, but they both look very, very similar. Yeah, they both look super similar. The one with the red is the one that's super, like, confident. What I was really kind of sad about in this episode, though, even though I thought that this scene was fine and it sets up some things, is we didn't get to see MaoMao practicing dancing with Jinshi. I wanted to see them practice. We didn't get to see her getting him in makeup. I really thought the majority of this episode was going to be like her teaching him how to dance, her getting him into makeup, her getting him ready. Like, I thought that was going to be the majority of the episode, and it was not even there. Like, we didn't get to see her get him ready. We didn't get to see her practice dancing with him. She looks beautiful, but I would love to have seen, like, her get ready and seen Jinshi's reaction to her. Like, he doesn't say much about it, but it's super cute. It just felt like it was really rushed. Like, we had to fit in the clinic part of this episode, and I wish we could have spent more time on the moon fairy bit, and then maybe had like the run-in with Sheen be the end of the episode and then move the clinic to the next episode. I don't know. It just felt like we skipped out on a lot of potential that could have been in this episode, and I was kind of disappointed about that. But yeah, they all have their blinds raised all the way up to show their face to the emperor. Like, girls be bold. Girls be brash and being like, we are here, we are busty, and we do not care if y'all see us. I like that we see Sheen, and she looks not impressed. But yeah, the further away one seems to be the quiet type, and the lady closer seems to be the confident one. The special envoys are on par with the high-ranking concubines. So they have the dance that they have here, but the ladies are not impressed. They seem bored. And then the one lady just gets down and she just like full on walks up to the emperor and is like, hey, like, can we ditch this and go somewhere? And it's like, girl, like she is so brash. I love the emperor just stares at her like, really? Because she says, greetings. I don't want to be a part at such a wonderful party. She's like, make room. Let me come up in there. So she wants to speak to the emperor. She's here to get with the emperor, and everybody's just like, what the fudge? And then she wants her quiet sister to get with the brother, aka Jinshi. I'm not surprised that it makes sense that the two of them came as a package deal to be like, hey, can we become your brother's concubine and your concubine? Can we just do that and, combine our countries together and whatnot? I am a little worried about that because, again, I don't want Jinshi to have to do things against his will. He clearly doesn't like these women. He doesn't even know them, but he likes MaoMao. So I'm like, back off, bitch. And I like that Hongmian, she gets mad on behalf of Gyokyo. We see that Li Hua's not happy. We don't get to see Gyokyo's reaction. And MaoMao's like, damn, they're really brash and bold. Very scary. Also, I'm sorry, but when they showed us, she said their goal is to get to the emperor and his brother. And yeah, we see the one with the blue, like next to the emperor's brother, who basically looks like Jinshi. I was like, okay, sure thing. Which MaoMao's depiction of what they look like to receive their love. A political machination involving marriage. Yeah, that seems to be the goal. And so that's when the one sister says Isla. So Isla is the one in red, and Eileen is the one in blue, with the blue on their headdress. They put on a great show. She's like, we need to be a little bit more kind and more polite. And so then she just like, my apologies, and she backs off. So yeah, and I love that Hongmian is so mad in that moment. Or Hongmian. I always get her name confused. Crisis averted. Maybe those two have no interest in the legendary beauty their grandfather saw. No, I think they did after what they saw today. They truly believe no one is more beautiful than them. Maybe the mirrors were sent as a provocation. I definitely think the mirrors were like a declaration of war to be like, are you as beautiful as we are? Because we're coming in to steal your spot. But she's like, my job is to show them the moon fairy. So they go to the little hut. I like Gao Shun's like, look, I did my best. I did the best I could to get him ready. I love it. And then she's like, well, that's a natural reaction. Of course, I like that she's kind of sneaky because I'm sure she's like, Jinshi's like, let's get this over with so I can get out of this makeup, please and thank you. But I will tell y'all, we'll get to one of my favorite moments coming up here. So they seem to have made the music more colorful to match us. But the dancing seemed just average Eileen. The famous 4 concubines are hidden behind their blinds. The moon fairy that our grandfather saw probably wasn't that impressive either. And she says, let's wait and talk about it when we get back. Like, Eileen seems to be like, we shouldn't be talking about this stuff in public. Anybody can hear us. She's like, we need to be behind closed doors. She seems super cautious. Like, she maybe thinks that this situation's a lot graver than the other sister believes. But she's like, what if the emperor wanted us right away? And then, but they really think that the emperor is just going to get them in bed instantly. So then MaoMao shows up, and the carriage stops. And I love that MaoMao reveals, it was such a good reveal, taking the hood off of Jinshi, making it look like he just appeared. That was so good. And then, of course, Jinshi looks like Aduo. Absolutely beautiful. My favorite part about all of this is that when she lets go of his hand, he grabs it for just a second and tugs on it and then lets go. Like for good luck for her. Oh, I'm like, girl, do you not realize that Jinshi loves you? And then he does the dance. I like that they don't make his hands look slender. If you look at the animation, his hands do look masculine, but it's his face that throws it off. And then there's all the lunar moths as he dances. I wish we could have seen him practice dancing with MaoMao, damn it. I wish we could have seen that, but it was a beautiful dance. And I love that MaoMao, girl doesn't even realize it, but she says this was a dance that no one else could see. Like, even the drivers turned away. Uh-huh. This is what the envoy's grandfather saw. Yep. And it's Jinshi with the same dress and robes. I'm like, these girls are going to be asking where that moon fairy was. But my problem is, what if they see Jinshi and figure out that it's him? What if they see Jinshi and they're like, you look like the moon fairy? Even without the makeup, I mean, Jinshi, it still looked like Jinshi even without the makeup. And the cherry blossoms, all of it. Mm-hmm. And then he jumps into the pond and disappears. Now, Isla asks what's going on, where'd she go? Who was it? And MaoMao doesn't say a thing, but just points to the moon and says Diana. Which, Diana being the goddess of the moon. And they're like, oh, okay. I love that. I thought that was really, really good. So, the two of them leave. I love Jinshi had to jump into the pond. That's really funny. I was wondering for a second where he disappeared to, but it makes sense. And Gao Shun's like, it worked out. We got to pull it off. I love that Jinshi is just soaked. It made him like he suddenly appeared. And the moths were the finishing touch. I like the one eunuch's like just very dismayed about it. So, one thing I didn't realize was when they smeared the moth onto her robes, the madam's robes, it like had the pheromones on it from the male moth and it attracted the other moths. So the whole time she was dancing in this beautiful dance, they were just like all these moths surrounding her and she was like, but she managed to do it so elegantly. I love it. I love that something that was not supposed to be intended to be like it was ended up working out in her favor. Hilarious. I love it. But yeah, it ended up all working out. And so a lot of work made sure that only the envoys saw this. She said we had to make sure the carriage drivers didn't look this way. So the other Gao Shun and the others were close by just in case they could step in if something happened. It was a sight that no one else should see. A powerful presentation enough to topple nations. I'm like, girl. MaoMao does not want to admit it, but she talks up Jinshi so much in this episode. She talks him up as a man that could topple nations. Girl, you do not understand what you're saying. Like, you are rile, just, and I love that it cuts to him, and he's just like, and after I do what you tell me, you just ignore me? I'm like, Jinshi, she is singing you praises in her mind. You don't even have a clue. I love it. He's just like, you ignored me. And she's like, oh, thank you very much, Master Jinshi. And he's just like swimming all the way in the opposite shore in your heavy outfit. I was like, well, did it work? And she's like, yes. I think we responded perfectly to the wishes of the envoy. I love it. So then he's sitting down there and he's all pouty and he's like, my hair's still wet. I love when MaoMao's like, you could dry your hair yourself, But she does it anyway for him. And I love that Gao Shun looks at her like, I'm so sorry that he is immature. He's 19. Just I love that Gao Shun's like, I love when Jinshi gets so childish because it reflects his age, and Gao Shun's like, just please humor him. And so MaoMao's like, okay, fine. I love that she dries off his hair like, you could do this yourself. It's so cute, though. It's adorable. I love it. So, here's the thing. We go to the one sister, Isla, not the one in blue, but the one that's very impetuous. We go to her, and she's sitting there being like, fine then. Like, what is her deal? Like, what is she looking at? I'm trying to say, is she looking at a mirror? What is she looking at on the other side? I'm trying to see what that was. It seemed like it was maybe a mirror that was there. Yeah, it looks like a mirror or a painting or something. Like, is Isla covering for Eileen? Like, what is the deal? Curious. I don't like these two cousins. They're too bold, too confident, and they look like they're just here to stir shit. So, no. Interesting. All right. So anyway, we have Xiaolan going off to school, which is super cute. Notice that Shisui wasn't with her because she already knows how to read. But we get a little bit of a lesson about the pavilion and the palace. So we go back to some stuff from season 1, which is that the quack doctor is selling scented oils. And we talk about the fact that the scented oils, when some of them are mixed together, they can be toxic and poisonous, which made me think of, like, if you're using cleaning supplies, you don't want to mix certain cleaning supplies together because it can create this ammonia gas that could be poisonous. That's what it reminded me of, only this is on a different level, obviously. But it's like, well, who conspired to bring all of the scented oils in? And then we go back to the idea of, well, it could be the envoy. You know, they're trying to land a spot as a courtesan on their list of goals, so maybe that could be it. But then she's like, she goes through the other. I like that she says, you know, with their pride destroyed, they would have much to worry about. I think it's interesting that Gaoshin has that moment where he looks off to the side. Does Gaoshin know something that we don't? I don't know. Curious. But then we get a history lesson about the 4 concubines, the 4 high-ranking concubines. I have a thought about Sheen and the scented oils, but I'm going to wait till we're caught up with her finding them. So we have the tree, we have a leaf, we have an apple, and we have a flower. Given the influence that her father exerts, Lowland is the most important. With her father, Shisho, is the favorite retainer who's held that spot since the previous emperor's reign. So Lowland is considered to be the most affluential of them, right? And Aduo had that spot previously. So Aduo being the childhood friend of the emperor and all that makes sense. And so Lowland is, you know, Lowland would be one that you wouldn't immediately want to get rid of, and she'd be hard to because her dad's been there so long and knows the family. He doesn't seem too passionate about it, so, well, looks can be deceiving. Then we have Lihua. I thought Lihua was like 3rd or 4th on the rankings. I did not think of her as being 2nd. So her family has power because theirs comes from being maternally related to the emperor. Okay, that makes her not as hungry for power. But she fell ill after losing her prince. And after recovering, she receives the love of the emperor. Okay, so it's not necessarily incest. At the time, I was like, are we going Game of Thrones here? But no, what it is that Li Hua's family is related to the emperor through the emperor's queen, the head concubine, the empress. So that's them maternally related through that. So the emperor's mom is possibly, the emperor's mother is related to Li Hua's family. So they are distantly related, but maybe not, you know, like kissing cousins maybe. Which I know back in olden times, royal families were like, we will totally marry cousins to keep the bloodline going and keep it, you know, pure or whatever, regardless of what that does. But I feel like maybe Li Hua is distantly related. But that's why, so she's not on the chopping block so much because she's related to the emperor's family. Then we have Li Shu's family, on the contrary, rose up in power in generations, and they're ambitious and sent their youngest daughter to the previous emperor. Kind of sucks for her family, like, to send their youngest daughter when she was like 9, being like, here, go be an empress. Like, what? But that kind of tracks with them being ambitious. But so they have political power and they have wealth. So they're doing fine. And the emperor hasn't bothered her since Aduo left. Then there's Gyokyo, who is the most beloved by the emperor, but has the most to lose. She has the emperor's daughter, and she's pregnant with another one of the emperor's childs, but she's from the Western nation that appears to be blooming from trade, but in reality, they're not rich since they're from lands that aren't fertile. So here's the thing. Gyokyo is the easiest to get rid of because she's not related to the emperor like Li Hua is. She's not tied to family and wealth like Lowland is. She's not from a wealthy, ambitious family that could probably do well without, like Li Shu is. Gyokyo's from an up-and-coming kingdom that are starting to get some trade going on, but they're not a wealthy nation. And she doesn't have political ties to her name. So even though the emperor seems to love her the most, she's the one that would be the easiest to get out because there wouldn't be as many repercussions. She wouldn't have a family come after the murderer, and she wouldn't have, wealth be lost to the emperor because of her getting killed. So her being targeted makes the most sense out of all of them. So if one of the cousins were trying to wiggle their way into the top 4 spot, then Gyokyo would be the one to get rid of, right? And so if Lolan and her dad were targeting anybody and working with the cousins to target someone, Gyokyo would be the one to do it because she's the one that has the least to lose in that scenario. And she said 2 attempts on poisoning of her life. The one was an accident, and we found that out. And it was Aduo's lady in waiting. But the other one happened when she was pregnant with Lingli. So who was responsible for that? They think it was Jin, but where did Jin learn about the poisons? And that's when we see Suirei, and we're like, we don't know what happened to Suirei. So was Suirei responsible? We don't know. We just don't know. So it's like, what can we say about her in this case? And then she's like, why did she go after Master Jinshi? So there's a lot that's like, I like that the spiral that MaoMao is spiraling out of control, like thinking about like, why was Gyokyo targeted? Why was Jinshi targeted? Was Suirei involved in it? Where is Suirei now? Where are the twins' involvement? Are they working with Lolan and their dad behind the scenes? Are there other players involved? It's this big old mystery, and it's like, we don't know. Anyway, she's like, I'm just a taster. Why am I worried about this? So then she walks past Li Hua's ladies in waiting, and they all walk past. I love that she's like, I just pushed them around a little bit. She's like, that's all I did. What? And then she talks to Sheen. Sheen walks past her. The only woman who wasn't wearing scented oils in the pavilion. Now, I originally thought Sheen was very suspicious because I feel like Sheen, I don't know if Sheen is jealous of Li Hua. I don't know if it's a situation like Hongmian where or Hongnian where she wants to leave and she can't because she's Li Hua's lady in waiting. I don't know. But I kind of lost a little suspicion on her this episode because if she's not wearing the scented oils, then that means that she's not actively trying to hurt Li Hua, because if she's not wearing the scented oils, that means that she's not trying to poison Li Hua with them. So that's interesting. Or it could be conversely, she's not wearing the scented oils because then if somebody asks, she's like, well, I had nothing to do with them. I don't have any scented oils on me, so it couldn't have been me. So it could be either, we just don't know all the evidence yet, but it's either her not wearing the scented oils, it either makes her more innocent or less innocent. And I don't know which way we're spinning the pendulum yet, right? Curious. So then Island gets sick and they go to the clinic. And we see the older woman. For a second, I thought we might see Gao Shun's wife here, but then I realized she doesn't work in the rear palace. She's like off somewhere else because she's Basin's mom and all that. And Gao Shun just wants to leave and go back with her. But I thought it was a cool concept. It also gives mind that if Suiren ever didn't need to be Jinshi's housemaid anymore, she could go here. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And also MaoMao, goes past the patriarchy to be like, well, she seems more professional than the quack doctor and her diagnosis is sound. It's like, So I feel like MaoMao kind of shoots herself in the foot around the clinic woman because MaoMao starts talking about like the alcohol smell and how cleanly it is and the ventilation. I think it wasn't much of a stretch for the clinic woman to realize, oh, this girl that knows everything about medicines and about the cleanliness of this place, she probably was making medicine too. I'm hoping nothing comes of it, that her knowing it isn't going to like get MaoMao in trouble. And the most it could be is like, you need to know your place within the patriarchy, girl. And she's like, okay, whatever. But anyway, so she runs into Jinshi. Why Jinshi was there? Who knows, except that he was looking for her. I feel like MaoMao just follows Jinshi around. He's like, let's go find Zhao Mao, shall we? And he's like, of course. Gao Xun's trying his best to play matchmaker, right? And he's like, don't walk around talking to yourself, you'll trip. And then she's like, how can I help you? He's like, well, I don't have any business. And he's like, what's wrong with talking to you if I happen to walk by? And I like that Gaoshun's like, oh my God. These two, Gaoshun is probably like, what is wrong with you two? Why can't you just have a normal conversation and flirt normally? Why do you two have to be so awkward around each other? And she's like, okay. So she's like, I didn't know the clinic existed. And he's like, well, weren't you paying attention? Didn't you get the tutorial when you came here? And she's like, oh, well, when she said I was discontent since I had been sold off, it was like, I love she just says it because that's how she is. And Jinshi's kind of like unhappy about that because, again, Jinshi feels kind of sad for her that she was, bought, and he doesn't like that. She's like, he seems saddened when he hears this story. And so then she's like, it's okay. She's like, it was more established than I expected, so I was surprised. Maybe that should be the official medical office as well. And he goes, no. He's like, it's not that easy. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, only men can be doctors. So treating a few scratches wouldn't be a problem, but only doctors allowed to treat major injuries. And doctors are allowed to make medicine. So she's like, oh, well, that's why there wasn't any medicine here at the clinic. And then Jinshi, that's when she's like, well, then how did I get away with it all this time? And he's like, well, we're looking the other way for you. That to me seems like if it was illegal from the start, I probably would have told her that like 8 months ago, rather than waiting till now for her to question it, right? Because that just seems like, I don't know, that seems like such a gamble to be going that long without saying anything to her. It seems like there's a convoluted backstory here. Yeah, so I'm sure MaoMao's like, well, how did I get away with this? And why is he just now telling me? That's weird. And he says, for the future, we need to be able to come up with a new way to get doctors because we're short-staffed. And he says, so that non-eunuchs can perform medicine. She says eunuchs. Now, he said non-eunuchs there, but I feel like he said, so eunuchs can perform medicine, which honestly, I wondered because Loman was a doctor, but was Loman a doctor before he became a eunuch? How does that work? And he says, when the current emperor came into power, he banned the surgery that makes eunuchs. Okay, so maybe Jinshi meant that the men that work there as doctors are eunuchs. They were just born men and became eunuchs. But Jinshi wants to find a way to allow women to practice medicine. Look at Jinshi being progressive. Look at him. I thought for a second what he was suggesting was finding a way for eunuchs to be able to perform medicine, because if Jinshi can say that it's him, since he's a eunuch, then he could cover for MaoMao. I don't know, but it says when the current emperor came into power, he banned the surgery that makes eunuchs. Well, isn't that convenient? Isn't that convenient? Around the same time that Jinshi was around? In other words, it's only a matter of time before they become seriously understaffed. So basically, Jinshi, his generation, are like the last generation of eunuchs there at the palace. And that's why they have all of the other women there. So MaoMao is saying that if they don't find a way to allow women to practice medicine, then eventually they're not going to have any doctors and they're not going to have any practitioners because they're all going to be too old. So we've got to find out a way to combat that. And then, but she says this out loud, I'm pretty sure, considering his age, the ban must have come right around the time he was getting it done on him. And she's like, well, how unfortunate if he'd only waited a few more years. Basically, which he's supposed to be 24 as the eunuch, but he's only 19. So she's not wrong. Technically, he had to age himself up to be able to pass as a eunuch that was on the cusp of when that procedure stopped. Oh my God. And then she says it out loud, and Gaoshun's like, oh my God. She's like, did you say that out loud? What were you saying? Gaoshun is like, oh, if only she knew that he wasn't a eunuch. He's like, what's that now? And she's like, oh, I did not mean to say that out loud. Gaoshun's like, I hate my life. He says, we need to go. Let's not think about this. But then he turns around and says, don't let anybody find out you're an apothecary and that you make medicine. I guess she's gotten away with it for so long because she's just been delivering the medicine, and so they just assume that that's it. But she says that, but of course, that's when the woman at the clinic Says, I smelled medicine on that servant girl back there. Does she secretly make medicines? Now, did Island give her away? I don't know. Anyway, I am super interested in knowing what is up with these cousins. What is up with, is this clinic woman going to rat on MaoMao? I hope that she doesn't. I hope she really doesn't and just talks to MaoMao instead and gives her another talking to rather than rat her out. But I'm really curious about Sheen. I'm really curious about the cousins that look like twins. I'm really curious about Jinshi trying to persuade the emperor to let other people practice medicine. I'm so curious, and I'm pretty excited for next week. So I'm very excited to hear your comments down below. Please, no spoilers, hints, or clues, but I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back very soon with more of the Apothecary Diaries. Bye.